with Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red. Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm your host, Greg Oram, along with my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, Mr. Richard Spray. With us on the panel, we're delighted to be joined by the Statman, Danscape. So, something a bit different today as we host our very first Nottingham Forest Q&A episode. We've reached out into social media to ask you to pose the Forest-related questions that you would like us to tackle. We'll do our best to give you our opinions on things like a possible formation switch, to who Forest might sign in the January window, to how Sean Dyche keeps Mr Marinakis happy. If you're watching this live and you are in the comments section, then please do drop in your own questions. And if we have time, we'll address some of those as well. So, this is the Talking Reds, and this is the Nottingham Forest question and answer session.
Ever since he bought the club, he just bought a passion and the drive.
5 years ago, people go, why do you rely on set pieces? Now they're in vogue. That's just the way it goes. You know, it's just a cycle. Skinny jeans, flared jeans, skinny jeans, flared jeans.
You know, with all the change that's happened, the bad performances, so it's happy to get our first win out of like 8-9 games, I think it is. And to do it here at the City Ground in the European nights is an incredible feeling, and there's no one here that deserves it more than the stadium, the fans.
So there's still a bit of a communication thing. Because obviously, listen to my voice, like, I've never met a manager with a voice like that before.
I feel like I can finally breathe. I feel like I can finally breathe. I feel like I can finally breathe.
Good to hear, Morgan. Feeling like possibly he's getting himself back into some kind of form. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, at some point. But welcome to the Talking Reds. Richard and Dan are with us. We're going to get straight into it. If you're in the comments, as I said, please let us know you're here. We'll do our usual shout outs where possible. A quick one to Ian Wigginton, who says, morning boys from Toronto. And Dr. Anna says, hi chaps. She's logged in fortuitously on time. We were a little bit late, actually. We're not normally late, but we were this morning. A couple of technical issues, but we're going to get off and running with it. Liking and subscribing and all that kind of stuff will remind you along the way. All right, and we'll say our good mornings as we go. So here comes the first question, which we'll put onto the stage for everyone to see. And this comes from a good friend of ours, Dwayne, from Oh Miss Rolling in Fanzine. In fact, it's kind of a double question. So here it comes. He says, yeah, there's the fanzine Dan's holding up as well. We both contribute to now and again. Do you see a scenario where a 4-4-2 includes two out-and-out strikers rather than Morgan behind? And then he's got kind of a part two, I suppose. We'll add this in as well. So he's asking, has Taiwo surprised you with his current form? And is the pecking order now, number one, Igor Jesus, number two, Taiwo, number three, Chris Wood, number four, Cali Moendo, or is it something different? So we're talking about the pecking order, chaps. And the main question is, do you see a 4-4-2 coming into play that includes two out-and-out strikers rather than Morgan behind? I'll leave the question on screen. Richard, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I'll kind of answer the second one first. So I don't think Taiwo, I don't think it's like shocking form per se, because I think we've seen elements of this at certain intervals previously. I mean, he's not banging in goals like he did the first season, right, where he was such a critical player in terms of helping us stay up. He scored that goal, obviously, against Arsenal. And so it doesn't feel like it's totally out of form for him or it's a shock to anyone, really. In terms of the pecking order component of it, I would definitely say Callum Wendo's at the bottom. I would probably say that Wood healthy would be number one. I just don't think you take a 20-goal guy off the pitch and all of a sudden he becomes useless. I mean, I know he's had a couple of moments where he's missed sitters and so forth. Is that sort of evidence that maybe he's degrading in terms of form? I don't know, and we'd have to see him come back from injury now. I mean, he's been out for a few weeks now, so once he comes back, I would still believe that he's number one in Jesus. Maybe it's like a 1A, 1B scenario where he's 1A and Jesus is 1B. They do a lot of things fairly similarly, but they also do, I think Jesus does things a little bit differently, and he's certainly younger, so that gives him an advantage there. But yeah, I would have those two guys at the top, and then you'd have Taiwo probably just because he fits more the mold of what Dyche would look for in a striker, and then probably Callum Window at the end of that. And then I would say though that if you do have a situation where you have two quote unquote out and out strikers, if you qualify Callum Window as an out and out striker, which I guess at this stage you would, because I think he can kind of play a little bit of the wing, he can kind of drop a little bit deeper into a 10. That's where I think he might be of value. When he's playing off another player, maybe playing with a Wood or playing with a Taiwo, for example. Jesus, I think, as an out-and-out striker, can definitely do that because his mobility and his hold-up play and his link-up play is really good. You don't lose anything in the air in terms of his ability to head balls in and so on and so forth. So, and he can play fairly physical. He's kind of like, Taiwo, same thing. I mean, he's a great player to come off the bench, for example, in late in the game where you're trying to secure a game. Because he's got decent aerial ability himself in the box on a defensive side as well as on the offensive side, coupled with the fact that I think you can make the case too that he can kind of wear down a defense, especially a center back pairing because he's so physical and he can run too. He's got an incredible engine too when he gets on the pitch. So yeah, I think it can be done. I don't think it's the ideal. I don't think it's the preferred mode of operating, but it would definitely mean that one of those players has to drop a little bit deeper, whereas Wood probably would play a little bit higher up the pitch and kind of operate with that press. But that doesn't mean he can't drop as well. It just seems like you would want someone playing off of Wood to try to do that work, so it's not forcing Wood to have to play, kind of execute that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Dr. Anna says she said, I didn't even know there was a pod. I've told you, Dr. Anna, you can set your notifications up. Every time we go live, you get a little ping in your pocket. So I'm telling you off now. Good afternoon to Holly. She's got a question which we'll maybe tackle later about Amari Hutchinson. Has he earned a start against Liverpool in their current vulnerable state? Surely he could do some real damage to them. We might tackle that one in a bit. Thanks for your question, Holly. Dan, on the question from Dwayne, do you see 4-4-2 coming into play with two big out-and-out strikers rather than Morgan? And what's your lineup in terms of strikers and their listing?
I think the lineup in strikers is similar to what Rich has already gone through, I would say, for me. So in terms of the question on the kind of formation, the chance of seeing two of those play in one game, I always see the style of we attacking, and it's been like this for a while, it's more of a trio of attackers that you've got to find. You've got to have the kind of wrestler guy who's just going to do enough to stop the defenders getting a good quality clearance on the ball or to get a flick on or something to disrupt things. Then you need that creative, skillful player with them to pick up that loose ball and do something with it. And then you need someone with the pace that's playing on the last line to get in behind and kind of receive that ball in that second kind of phase of the play. So I think when you go to two out-and-out strikers like Wood or Taiwo, you don't have that skillful player in there to pick up the second ball. And I think you might win a bit more of the first ball, but then you can't get hold of it to do anything with it. Because I think back to even in the Championship under Cooper, you had Keenan Davis was the guy who would just wrestle defenders around. Zinkernagel would pick up the ball and Brennan Johnson was the out ball, right? And that was the trio. That was pretty much our entire attack. And teams knew it, but they still couldn't stop it because if you're good enough, you can still do something with it. And obviously in the Premier League, it's been Gibbs White and Taiwo or Wood and Elanga and Johnson have all formed that trio at times. And so I just think if you put another striker in there, you break that up and it becomes very much more of a kind of a direct style of play. Like your main benefit of playing two out and out strikers is when you cross the ball into the box, but crosses into the box tend to be quite low quality, chances. There's only about, I just Googled it then, like 20, according to Google or AI or something, 23% of crosses turn into goals. So it's kind of a low percentage option if you put players in the box and just pump the ball into them. So do I see a scenario where it includes two out and out strikers? Probably not, unless, I suppose the question on the back of this is if Morgan was out injured, could McAtee fulfill that role well enough, I suppose, is probably the main question. Like, could someone else step into that role and do well enough that you don't need more of a physical presence because you'll have someone that can read the game and pick up those second balls? But I don't see it as being a go-to even for Sean Dyche. I think we do play 4-4-2 at times, but I think it's that kind of big man, skillful man partnership that works, I think, for me. So yeah, I suppose that's my take on that one.
Okay. I mean, the way I see it, when it comes to listing the strikers in order of preference, I just think it's a horses for courses situation. And let's get them all fit firstly. And if we get them all fit at the same time, I think it is probably Wood that is your first choice if we're going with a lone striker. But again, when we're thinking about the rotation that we're needing to put into this squad with the Europa games, which we really hope will continue, obviously, into the new year, then again, it's a horses for courses moment. Wood might play Premier, Igor might play in Europe. So I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to kind of list them in order, if I'm honest with you. And yes, Taiwo has surprised me to a certain degree. No, let me take that back. I don't think I've been surprised by Taiwo. I've just been surprised that he's still in the picture. That's what I think I'm trying to say. And I said this before. When Ange left us, is his parting gift to give us Taiwo back? Because Taiwo was nowhere near the scene until all of a sudden Ange Postecoglou put him into that team against, was it Chelsea on the last game, wasn't it? And Taiwo fit. We all loved Taiwo and what he could do for us in seasons 1 and 2. It was just fitness issues. We all had Taiwo well ahead of Chris Wood. It took an injury to Taiwo to get Wood in the team, and we saw what he did. But Taiwo's been kind of injury-free for a good year now because he's had less game time. So obviously, okay, take aside the clatter into the post, that side, that was a freak injury. But I'm talking about, muscular stuff that he picks up during a match and so on. He's been fairly good in that respect. And he is a Dyche-type player in that big, burly, he holds the ball up really well. So I can see him actually playing a role. It wouldn't surprise me that Taiwo stays in the squad after January as well. But we might maybe tackle that in another question later on. And when it comes to this scenario of 4-4-2, I just don't know. I mean, it's a throwback. You think Niall Quinn and Kevin Phillips at Sunderland back in the day, big lad, small lad. You think Peter Crouch and Jermaine Defoe, big lad, small lad. 2 big lads up front together. I'm not sure that that's where we should be going. It might be that it turns into that during a game where we're chasing a game and we're trying to do something different. And we saw that as well, I think, against Sunderland, if I'm not mistaken, when we had Igor Jesus and Chris Wood on the pitch at the same time. If we were to say, listen, you're going to play 4-4-2 and you're going to pick 2 strikers, I'd be more inclined to pair a Cali Mwendo with one of them. So you've got that kind of differential in their skill set, someone running off him. And we've talked about how it seems that Cali Mwendo suits playing with someone next to him. So maybe he can, pick up a ball from Chris Wood or Igor Jesus that glances off their head in over the back. So it's a different style of play. It's not something that I see us doing, but it might be something that Dyche turns to at some point. So yeah, it's something we'll have to look out for. I'll take this off quickly. I'm going to give you guys literally 20 seconds on this question that Holly posed because we've got a lot of questions, a lot to get through. So nothing too developed. But Richard, has Amari Hutchinson and start against Liverpool?
I think he's going to start in general. Whether it's against Liverpool to me is a question, only because of the kind of talent that they're gonna field. And the one thing we've recognized about Dan and Doy's ability is that I think he can drop and defend. The question about Amari, can he provide the pace? Can he provide the trickery to kind of get around players? I mean, we at least saw him do that in the last match. Can he do that against the quality of a Liverpool backline, like against a Robertson, for example, who seems to be falling into favor now as opposed to Kirkesh? I don't know. I that's where I would question. I think in that kind of match, maybe against a different side, and that's not quite as elite, you might consider that because then you worry about the thank you. Sorry, 20 seconds. You're right. There you go. I'm done. No, not in this match, but maybe in another match.
Thank you. Danscape, where are you on Amari? Is he due to start or do we keep him for the bench?
I would keep him for the bench. I think he's brilliant around the penalty area, and I think that's a different part of the pitch, though, obviously, to getting hold of the ball in the middle of the park when you're under pressure and when you don't get much in the way of possession and then building something for the team. I think that's a different part of the game. And I think against Liverpool, we have to do 80% of that and 10% around the box. So for me, it's just not a game for him, basically.
I agree. I think he's really done himself a load of favours. But let's attack Liverpool in the same kind of style of what we did last season. Go tight, pack the midfield, and let's have those options off the bench. It was Alanga and Hudson-Odoi that came on last year. It could be that Amari Hutchinson is the guy that comes on and wins the game for Forest again. He's flying high. He's feeling really good after his performance last week. So let's see what happens. Thanks for the question, Holly. Okay, let's go straight back on with this next one. And it comes from David Jones, who is a regular watcher and supporter. Thank you, David. He says, if the club decides for a relatively calm January transfer window and we are only allowed 2 in and 2 out, who are they? So, Danscape, over to you first. Who are they possibly if it's just 2 in, 2 out in January?
Well, it's tough with the ins, isn't it? Because I suppose we already have quite a full squad. So it's whether you can find space for an actual starting player that's going to impact the first 11 or not, or whether you're just trying to upgrade a backup player. I suppose the two I kind of wrote down, I think Cuiabano could be a good option to actually bring in and give a shot if we are going to see Zinchenko either not return to the team or whether his loan can be terminated. I don't know the conditions of his loan and all that, whether that's even an option. But I do wonder whether on that left side, we can allow that fullback to attack a bit more, and whether Cuiabano with a bit of Dyche training on the training ground can get up to speed to do a job. So I'm always putting him in as one of the possible incomings. And then I suppose the other one is a midfielder. I do think we could do with another midfield option, but it's hard to, it's really hard in January to get anyone that you think is going to impact.
You think we need another midfielder? We're not packed in that midfield though, Dan. Sangare, Yates, Dominguez. I know Douglas Luiz got injuries. Anderson, Gibbs White can play there. McAtee. Are we not packed enough?
I suppose I was just kept thinking that we sort of look at different team with Luiz, and it's whether or not he's going to play those minutes, because we don't need a striker. I know that we don't need a winger. We've got plenty of those. We need fullbacks, which I've touched on. So where's left other than central midfield? So I kind of feel like if you're going to bring 2 in, the other one is going to be that midfielder that maybe offers something a bit different. I suppose my question is, what happens if Anderson gets injured, right? Who of those midfielders you listed can really replace Anderson? It's only really Luiz, but he's also regularly injured. So it would be that style of midfielder if there was a loan option, I suppose, that you're looking at. But it's hard. It's really hard to get quality in January. I suppose that's the big question mark. And in terms of outs, I mean, one of Abbott or Cunha really, I feel like should go and get some football. I mean, they both would, I think, benefit massively from a 6 months in the Championship for me. So that would be one of the outs.
I think the question is asking about making squad space, though. They don't need to go out to make squad space. Who are you shipping out the squad to make the space?
Well, Zinchenko's out for Cuiabano, isn't he? And then
yeah,
well, we don't need 2 in, 2 out then, do we, basically? Because I don't think anyone else would come in that would upgrade it. So it's kind of
that's not what the question is asking.
No, exactly. So you're gonna have to allow me to ignore squad numbers, because there's just no way around it. Potentially Tyro goes out, but Aina comes in, doesn't he, to the Premier League squad? So you're already still at capacity. So it's like
got an answer for you. Steve Battermuch has said it. It's there.
Oh yeah, well, it's an option. Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
Sacrilege.
I'm pitting Steve up against you.
Yeah, no, he's always had a gripe with Bolly, I reckon. No, it's an option, but again, then you're really relying on Jair Cunha or Abbott to step into that right hand side defender.
I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with that at all.
I mean, I think it'll be fine, but I think you'll also see some mistakes that potentially cost you, because that's just what happens with defenders. I think young defenders just make mistakes. That's just the way it goes. You're in the wrong line for offside and all that stuff. It's a tough question. I don't think we'll do that much business. I think if we could find a fullback, that would be me completely happy. And there will, I suppose it's Abbott or Cunha. For me, 6 months in the Championship is where they make those mistakes, rather than for Forest, I suppose, is all I'm thinking.
Okay. I'm going to chip in before I come to Richard. What I would say is that a loan for Abbott is a good idea, because I think that he needs to be playing and it's good for his development, unless you are going to give him more game time in the first team for Forest. If I'm shipping 2 out and 2 in, so we're talking 2 squad members out, 2 squad members in, then Zinchenko's the obvious candidate. We've got to terminate that loan. I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to turn to Cuiabano yet. I just don't know. I just don't know about that. I guess that's the obvious quick answer without me having to scramble around and think of a decent left back option out there. The other option for going out is the obvious one at the moment, Kali Mwendo, because of the way he hasn't had the game time and has been quite limited in terms of his appearances and his ability on the pitch. I could see Bolly going out to create space, but I'm going to say Kali Mwendo. It looks like it's building up towards him either going out on loan somewhere or leaving the club entirely. And the one that I would bring in, because I would bring another striker option in, would be Ivan Toney. I think that he's going to be available in January. I think he wants to come back to the Premier League, and I would.
Pricey.
Yeah, I just think that that's where I'm at today. I'm worried about the lack of goals. I know that Wood's been out injured. Igor Jesus still hasn't scored a Premier League goal yet, and it hasn't looked like him scoring. I know he got 2 in the Carabao Cup and he got 2 in the Europa, and then another one in a penalty form. And everyone kind of thought, okay, that's our problem solved. He's the main guy. But sorry, but that's just to trigger a reaction, in my opinion. We need to see him scoring more regularly. And he doesn't look like he's going to score a goal in the Premier League at the moment. He's had shots that keepers have saved. He's not. I can't think of one opportunity that I'm like, oh my God, how hasn't he scored that? It just doesn't feel like he's getting himself into the really good positions to score goals. And maybe that's a reflection on the team and how they've played. And maybe we'll see that develop more under Dyche. So maybe I'm calling him out a little bit too early. Don't get me wrong, I still rate Igor Jesus a lot. I think he's brought good things to the club. But if you're asking me in terms of this question, the 2 out would be Zinchenko and Kalimawendo. The 2 in would be, let's say, Koulibaly or another good left back and Ivan Toney. Richard Spray.
Well, thanks for leaving me a lot of options. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know. I would probably agree with you on Zinchenko and Koulibaly. That sort of flip those two. But I would also wonder too, what's the status with Angus Gunn? I mean, it sounds like he's got an injury. Is it an extensive injury to the point where he's going to be out for a significant period of time? Do you trust John Victor to be that backup goalkeeper? Do you think maybe you can get somebody in? Because there have been moments that we've seen challenges with Sells. I mean, he looked pretty decent in the last match, but again, he's had problems commanding the box per usual and coming off his line to try to help that set piece scenario, which didn't rear its ugly head in the last match, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen against a Liverpool or against an Arsenal in the future, who are good at those things. Would it be potentially prudent to consider finding someone? I mean, that's maybe if you find a good goalkeeper that's available or accessible to you can pry from somebody else. The problem becomes then, what does that do to your wage bill? And does that put more stress on what you do before June 30th next year? But it's just another option I think that you might consider, because I think Angus Gunn's a bit disappointed, right, about not getting any game time. So I wonder if he's maybe a guy that should go out or we could replace with somebody else.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm overly worried about third choice goalkeeper. If I'm honest with you, I mean, if he goes, he goes.
Well, it's not just a third choice; it's the second choice. Because do we really feel good about Victor? I guess that's the question.
No, you're right to say that. It's a very good point as well. I mean, before I forget, I mean, I popped it up. Ian suggested AFCON. I don't think Ola Aina is going to go AFCON. Ian, I'd be staggered if he goes to AFCON having barely made it back from. He's not due back till January, I don't think. So Taiwo might go because he's been playing. Sangare is the only one I'm really expecting to go to AFCON. I'm not sure that's going to really come into play in our recruitment too much. Going down, what was that?
Willy Bolly might go as well, don't forget.
I hope so. I hope he goes. So yeah, listen, it's very difficult to predict a 2 in 2 out scenario. I know 1 or 2 are saying no to Ivan Toney. I don't know. I think he's a proven scorer. It might be that we get to January.
Whether he can, because what you're saying with Jesus is that he hasn't really had the chances to miss. So if you want to change up that striker, it's got to be someone that's going to create their own chances almost, because it's not like he's been missing sitters. And we know we've got a couple of strikers that can take chances when they're created. So I don't know whether Tony's that kind of striker that will make his own chances.
Okay,
and he would cost money. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, his
wages.
Maybe he's a big bag, and we can do something on a loan scenario. We will have to wait and see. If you're enjoying the video, please do go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It helps us out. If you're listening on podcast, we thank you for tuning in a bit later on. We're on Apple and Spotify, as you know, as well as a few others now as well. So 5-star reviews on all platforms are very heartily received. All right, next question. This comes from Frank the Tank. Frank the Tank 622 on X. What a name. Thank you. So he's kind of like set it up like this for those that can't see it on screen. He's saying, what does Dyche have to do to keep his job next season? If you're Marinakis, and of course no one else matters, is it safe is it to keep us safe in mid-table, such as a 10th to 14th finish and win a cup? And do we think he has to win a cup to stay? So once again, what does Dyche have to do to keep Marinakis happy and keep his job? Is it to keep us safe in around the mid-table area and win a cup? And we think that actually a cup is really essential for him to keep his job? What do you think, Richard?
I think he might have a think about it, that he being Marinakis, if he does get us up to somewhere in 10th, because that would be quite an ascension from where we are now. That might, even without winning a cup, even without maybe going deep into Europa or something of that effect, I think it might cause Marinakis to pause, just simply because look what he's done, considering the situation and all the turmoil and the disruption that's unfolded. If he wins a cup, I definitely think he stays. Now, again, it's if he wins a cup and then finishes 16th, does that keep his job? Because we've already seen someone else who's been in here who's done that and lost his job. So, but I would imagine it's really just about keep us in the Premier League, period. Now, does that keep his job? Probably not. I think it would have to be some sort of combination of either finishing much higher up the table than expected, or finishing somewhere around 14th to 16th, but also winning a cup of some sort. That might cause Marinakis to genuinely pause and think about keeping him.
Okay. I'm going to quickly chip in on this one before I come to Dan. I don't think that Sean Dyche has to win a cup to stay in the job. I think that Mr Marinakis is far more switched on and sensible than some people realise. I know that he has the trigger-happy tag, and I know that obviously the Ange situation supports that potentially, in that he got 39 days and 8 games and then he was gone. But he was never the right fit for us, and Mr Marinakis held his hands up effectively and said, I got it wrong, guys, and got rid of him. When we look at Nuno and Steve Cooper, those managers were given good time, and I think that Mr Marinakis understood the scenario we found ourselves in, having just come up under Cooper. And look, he was obviously a fan favourite, and he listened to the fans, and he let it go for as long as he possibly could before making the change. He understands what kind of a perilous situation we're in following a really rubbish start to this season, going back to the pre-season, going back to the second of Nuno, the Ange, the Morgan Gibbs-White thing and everything. So I think he's realistic enough to know that Sean Dyche got to come in and get us in a stable situation. And I think that, again, my gut feeling is that Mr Marinakis will understand that. A cup would be a bonus. I don't think he needs to win a cup to stay. I don't think that Dyche has to get us into a mid-table position either in order to stay. I kind of feel like it's about survival, but a survival with flair. That doesn't mean just scraping into 17th and staying up. I think what I'm trying to say is get us safe, but get us comfortably safe. Get us comfortably safe. Show that actually the players have responded, that there's a platform to build on, that Dyche and Stone and Wone have been the right choice, and everything that's been talked about in terms of their skill set and what they bring to the club has come to pass. And so I think Marinakis will look at it through that lens, and Edu will be part of that as well. So I would obviously want us to finish as high as possible. I don't want us to scrape staying up. If we scraped staying up and the wheels were coming off at different points along the season, then I think Dyche is probably in peril. But my gut feeling is that we will stay up safely. I don't know that we'll win a cup. I think that we could go deeper into the Europa than people thought we would do a few weeks ago, because I think things are going in the right direction. And obviously we're feeling good after the Leeds result. So, yeah, I'm pretty certain that in order for Dyche to keep his job next season, is keep us up safely and show enough that the players are responding to him and doing the right things, and that the mood around the club is lifted so we can build in the next season. Danscape, that's my answer. What's yours?
Well, I tend to like to have considered answers and maybe sit on the fence at times, but I remain convinced that Sean Dyche will not be our manager next season, pretty much regardless what he does. I guess the caveats to that will be who's actually available in the summer. Potentially people are available or not, and maybe that sways it. And I guess I could maybe caveat it to say I don't think he'll finish next season. We might have another kind of summer where we and ah about him, and then if he doesn't get off to a good start next season, then the pressure mounts very quickly and we make a change. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I think we'll see the same kind of chaos or turmoil. So it has to be ideally a decision that's made early on. But I mean, the question says if I am Marinakis and no one else matters. So I don't know whether that's me pretending to be Marinakis or me being me in that position where it's just my decision. I think if it's my decision, it's probably the same. I feel like there's sort of an inevitable ceiling to where we get to under Dyche, and I just don't think that marries up with the ambition that we have and we've shown, and I think that's why it clashes potentially with Marinakis's view. I think this appointment was, I mean, it was reported, wasn't it, on the tweets and all that it wasn't anything to do with Marinakis. It was Edu. It was a decision led by Edu and Sirianos, right? That's how it was reported. Now, whether or not that's true, who knows? But for me, you're attributing it, say, as Marinakis being a sensible decision, and that I don't know whether he ever bought into this. I think it's almost like he sort of washed his hands and said, right, let's just do it. Let's apply the sticking plaster. Let's get to the end of the season, be safe, and then we'll try again, and we'll try and plan that real step up into a solid top half team and potentially a top 6-8 team. So unfortunately, I think that's where it's at. That doesn't mean I'm not behind Dyche myself in terms of where we are, and hoping that, of course, I'm way better off if we do really well and he keeps his job, because I'm a happy fan. But the truth is, as to where I see it, I think he's going to struggle to keep that job. Unless obviously he finishes like 10th and wins the cup, something like that, or top 8 and wins the cup. Yeah, okay, fair enough. But in terms of where I expect us to be, which is mid-table-ish and do okay in the cup, maybe sneak it, I still think he goes, unfortunately.
So it sounds like you are suggesting that you think Dyche has been brought in as literally only a sticking plaster, and Marinakis basically hasn't told anybody, of course, because you would never tell anybody that that's the case. He's our manager. We're backing him. Let's get behind him. But ultimately, he literally is basically an interim. He's been brought as an interim guy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I view it, I think. And I think if you look at the Nuno situation, I mean, you think what Nuno achieved, and one way or the other, he wasn't supported. You could argue that he wanted out, obviously not without opening all that stuff up again, but he sort of wasn't backed, was he? When it came down to it, of like, should we stick with this guy or not? If you think what he achieved last season, he wasn't backed. So, it's hard to see what Dyche can possibly do to be unsackable, I suppose, in the eyes of Marinakis, if he thinks there's a better option out there that fulfills his view of where we're going as a club.
If Dyche turns out to not be great, does that mean then that Edu's in peril of being sacked? If it's his guy, his appointment, what do you think, Richard? At what point does Marinakis turn to Edu and say, listen, I brought you in, mate, to fix this club and to get us moving in a better direction, and so far you've brought in players that don't work and get injured. You've fallen out with a good manager that might have taken us to the next level in terms of Nino, and you brought in Dyche, who I never really wanted, and I kind of just went with it, and I've been proven right. It was a load of rubbish. Does Marinakis turn around to Edu and say, see you later, or is he unpenetrable at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, again, that then means that he's got to admit that it was a mistake on his part, right? So, well, will he do that directly? Probably not. He'll probably do that indirectly, because we all believe that Ange was a Marinakis appointment. So he went ahead and did not come out and say that he made a mistake, but he clearly realized that and indirectly said he made a mistake and took him out of the equation. And could that be the same kind of thing, or could he redirect him back to just say, hey, I really want you just to have a high level sort of oversight of the entirety of all my clubs that I'm now I have ownership of or majority shares in. That could be the possibility as well. And then maybe
so
he tries to
basically move across. So
exactly, redeploy to kind of become what we thought he was going to be to begin with, right? Which is this sort of director of football operations across all of the clubs, as opposed to just that individual club. So maybe he says, if he believes in Sirianos, great. If he has somebody else in mind that he can bring in and potentially just focus in on Forest and getting us to a better, position holistically from how we operate in terms of getting back into Europe next season. If we don't make that through some, winning the FA Cup or winning Europa or something to that effect, but that may be the play. I mean, he may not necessarily admit he's made a mistake and just can him completely. He may kind of replace him with somebody and redeploy him to be more of a high level leadership person.
Okay, thank you. Few shout outs. Tim Shipman's with us. Nice to have you with us, Tim. Thank you very much. And Simon J as well in the comments. Who else have we got? One or two others. Way NFFC Mark says still plenty of time for Dyche to get us into the top half. And Brucey in Texas just says be competitive. Yep, that's what we hope for. What time are we at? Oh, we've time to do this.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
The Cheese Trader is putting up a Nottingham Forest shirt for a fantastic competition giveaway ahead of Christmas coming up. So we're going to be revealing the plans around that once Richard and I have actually spoken about it and worked it out. So keep your ears and eyes peeled for that. We'll let you know what's going on. But the Cheese Trader in York, it's a great family business. And Stu Freestone is a great guy. So support your fellow Forest fan. Get your cheesy goodness online, 10% discount with Talking Reds code, of course. Christmas is coming, and trust me, with that cheese, I'll be getting even more fatter. So, yeah, let's get some business going towards Stu Freestone. All right, next question. Let's have a look at this one. All right. This is from Philip Hardy. This was a Facebook post on one of our posts on Facebook. He asked, what are your thoughts on our recruitment for the two campaigns, Europe and Premier League? Did we keep in players that are at the levels needed in... Sorry, did we bring in players? I beg your pardon. Did we bring in players that are at the levels needed in key areas, such as defence and attack? So once again, what are your thoughts on the recruitment for the two campaigns? And did we bring in the players that are at the levels needed in key areas, defence and attack? What do you think, Dan?
Recruitment for the two campaigns. So I think
we had a problem with this going back to the summer when we didn't know what competition we were in. That caused a problem, didn't it? Or did it? You weren't sure whether it did or didn't.
I don't think it should have, personally. I think unfortunately, I don't think that was a good decision. I think we've maybe seen a bit of the issues with waiting for players to get them in late and you know, all that. And plus some of the players that we did bring in, presumably on the basis of Europa, are probably the players that we don't rate that much, like Zinchenko being one of them. So overall, in terms of the Premier League, what we wanted to do from last season was improve the subs bench, right? So we wanted the options from Jota and Sosa coming on as wingers or filling in games where other players were tired. We wanted to upgrade that. And I think we're starting to see with Hutchinson in particular, we've got that on the bench and he can start to force his way into the side potentially. And hopefully, aside from injury, we'll see that from Bakwa as well. So I suppose if you're saying, have we recruited in that area of the pitch to address our issues in the Premier League last season? Yes. The other area being, I suppose, that we were always we weren't light on fullbacks, but we knew that we were losing Toffolo. Moreno was going back on loan. And that's the area where we haven't really addressed it, right? We're still on a knife edge of Nico Williams being fit between probably staying up and going down at this rate. And that's not a good position to be in, I suppose, if you look at the overall strategy of recruitment for the Premier League. For Europe, it was always going to be, I guess, a new experiment as to how much the same players played in those games and how much we rested players and that side of it. I suppose when we did our kind of pre-season, we did a pod looking at squad depth, right? And I suppose we saw that there are times when it is possible to keep those players ticking over and play more games. So I think we've gone down the other option of trying to rotate in games, and it's not really worked so far. In terms of just putting those, whether it's like the Sunderland rotation where we changed for the Premier League, or whether it's the Sturm Graz rotation where we didn't get those points over the line that might make our lives easier down the line. So I suppose the Europa League is just, I think, a lessons learned. It's trying to find the balance. I think we are still trying to find that balance. And I think we have brought the players in that are at the level we need in the second part of the question. I guess maybe fullback, I suppose, if you're talking defence, it's just that fullback area where I don't think they're at the levels we need. And Savona's doing well, but he's not a complete fullback insofar as worrying teams the other way all the time, I think. So I think that's the area where I'd question it. The rest of it, I think Premier League, yeah, we kind of did what we needed to do. Europa League, I think we're still trying to find our way to manage these next few games, and then we'll see how obviously if we qualify, the squad will change a bit and the approach will change a bit. So we're learning on that one.
It's funny, Richard, isn't it? I mean, the recruitment really has been such a massive, massive thing for Forest in the last 4 years. And we go back to the first window coming up out the Championship and all those players that we brought in. And you're always going to have hits and misses. And we had probably more misses than hits. But as we've developed into a Premier League side, we still have kept up quite a significant amount of recruitment in terms of incomings and outgoings. And maybe that's a plan of action that not many clubs would want to undergo, because there's always the risk that if you go down, you've got a lot of expensive players on your books on high wages and so on. And so far, it's paid off for Forest. And I remember in the summer, we were thinking about what kind of business they might do under Nuno and how many it might be. And I think I remember, I don't want to misquote you, but I think you only thought maybe 5 players might come in. I think it was about the 5 mark. I had it down at more than that. I think about 8 or 9 or 10. I think it ended up being 13. And so when we think about those players that came in and those that went out, let's remember we had a lot of going out. Getting a lot of players off our books was really important, and we managed to do that in the summer. So that was a really good thing. So in terms of the question, then, thinking about the likes of bringing in Igor Jesus, and we cried out for, let's go and get McAtee, let's go and get Hutchinson, and lo and behold, we got them. Going back 2 years, we got Anderson out of nowhere. No one was really crying for Anderson, but he's the best player in the Premier League at the moment, in my opinion, in terms of his metrics in the midfield area. So have we recruited thoughtfully and properly for those European and Premier League campaigns? And those players that come in, are they at the levels needed in those defensive and attacking areas?
Yeah, there's a lot of caveats with that, isn't there? But just simply because you didn't have a preseason, there was a lot of disruption, a lot of, like I said earlier, so it becomes difficult to kind of rate things. I would say that Savona to me is a bit of a surprise. As he turned into, Munoz or something from Crystal Palace? No, not, he's not in that sort of stratosphere by any means, but he's played really, really well comparatively. I mean, he's done better than we anticipated. Even when we've seen Jair Cunha at that right back position, he's done a decent job. Again, he'll make mistakes because he's a young player, as Dan referenced earlier. But I do say Igor Jesus, my goal for him, pun intended, was that he have at least 10 goals across all competitions, right? And he's already 40% of the way there. So I think there's definitely signs of a good job, or a job well done in terms of the recruitment team. But, you're right. Callum Wendo's still a, jury's out scenario. I would say too, I mean, Delane Backwood to me is somebody that I guess I continue to be excited about and hope for the future. Amari Hutchinson's already been touched on in terms of what he might become. McAtee to me is still another jury's out scenario, because we don't really know how he fits in, because if Morgan is going to be sticking around for longer than this season, then it becomes very difficult to see how you consistently. He can play on the wing, but I don't think that's really his preferred area of play. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens next off season as well, because to your point, there's been not a complete turnstile, because most of the starting 11 has stayed somewhat intact. Your Inez, your Williams, Milenkovic now after being brought in before last season. But there's going to be, I think, another sort of shift and a tide shift for the team in the offseason next season, because they're going to have potentially players like Morgan going out, Murillo going out. Anderson definitely going to be, there's going to be a bidding war for him for sure, right? Especially if he shows out in the World Cup. So when he's already in the England squad, he's pretty much penned, he's inked in at this stage, but at least from what Tuchel was saying. So
he is tattooed in.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Exactly. That's a better way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think because of those things, you're probably going to, I mean, that does open up, it'll be interesting to see what that does for our PSR position. It may just wash some of the extensive amount of money we've spent in this window, this summer window that just passed. But yeah, I do think they've gotten it right more often than not. And I do think there's a lot of talented players that they brought in that not only provide depth, have had some Premier League experience in some cases like Hutchinson and McAtee, but also in terms of the talent that you're developing for the future, when some of these other players potentially are out the door. Because we don't know what will happen. I mean, Callum signed a new deal, but let's say he has a really good second half of the season or 3/4 of the season, and just, scores another 7 or 8 goals like he did, I think, season 1 with us. season 2. I'm trying to remember when he scored 8, but could someone come knocking for him? Could someone come knocking for Nico Williams? Because we talked about it. Could Liverpool suddenly come back around trying to solve their right back issues? And he's definitely a really good player. I mean, we're looking at some stats, right, Dan? I mean, Nico's right at the top of that wing back list. So I definitely think that there's potentially some guys that will go out that we're not expecting, and that puts us in a position where we've really got to, again, get back to probably more recruiting than we anticipated come the summer next year.
Okay. I mean, my thoughts on the recruitment is really tied in with all of the unrest that was happening off the pitch. And I know that we obviously were holding out to find out which European competition we were in. Whether that's right or that's wrong, but that's what the club decided to do. And that affected things happening late on in the window. So in terms of the players coming in, I'm happy with the level of Zinchenko. I'm happy with the level of Douglas Luiz, but their fitness levels and their fitness record is a concern. That's the problem. Bringing Zinchenko in the way that it happened was really exciting for us because we were live at the time, and I thought, God, how could this not be a good signing? Because he's got European experience and he is a skillful player. And so I was happy with that, but he can't stay fit. Douglas Luiz can't stay fit. So we got players coming in that are at the levels needed, but the problem is they can't get them on the pitch. The other problem as well is that we probably looked at the likes of the Carabao Cup as an opportunity, and we did it at the Swansea game where we made 10 changes. And we won the game, albeit for then capitulating with like 30 seconds to go. I mean, that was the problem, that Ange left us that in his legacy, that we didn't stay in the Carabao. And I know that there's the argument, well, look, if Carabao Cup games are still in the mix right now, we'd have less rest time. But I firmly believe that we could make wholesale changes to the 11 for the Carabao Cup and still put up a good showing. It didn't come to pass. We now find ourselves in the Europa League, and we did it against Sturm Graz. And I know that a lot of it was injury related. We put out a different looking team with the likes of McAtee on the pitch and Kalimawendo on the pitch. We couldn't play Hutchinson. So bad decisions have been made in the recruitment side of things as well, which takes us back to the Nuno saga. And whoever let him pick that squad, if they let him pick it, I still don't know that was his choice, because it is absolutely mind-blowing that they would let him pick that Europa League squad and he's sacked again days later. But Hutchinson should have been in the squad. So in terms of recruiting for the 2 campaigns in Europe and the Premier League, I think we brought in the right players. But then you look at McAtee, and he hasn't had the game time that we thought he would do. I think the Europa League has now got to be his avenue for that. McAtee now has to play. We have to rotate this squad. Even with the injuries in play, or even without injuries in play, I should say, even if everyone was fit, I would still want to see that rotation, because I think that McAtee is at the right level. Hutchinson should be in the squad in January for the Europa League. He is at the right level. The team are evolving under Dyche now to hopefully come out and be in a safe place in the Premier League. So in terms of the recruitment for the players coming in, yes, I was happy, but you're right to say, Dan, the one area that was shocking is fullback. Savona has worked out to be a good signing as it stands at the moment. But the Zinchenko signing and the fact that he's always injured means that we are in peril, because Ola Aina's out. So that was an area, and that was left very, very late as well. That was left last minute, and they were scouting around trying to get this player in, that player in, and it felt like it was a bit of a shambles. So I was unhappy with how they approached that, and we found ourselves high and dry with Ola Aina getting injured. So there's been mistakes that have been made, but it's tied into the off-field situation as well, with Nuno going, with Edu coming in, with not knowing who's picking what squad, all up and down. I think that once we get more settled, and we are getting more settled, we can realign ourselves in January with players going out of the door, maybe 1 or 2 coming in, but also a readjustment on the Europa League squad as well. I do think it's time to say goodbye to Willy Bolly. I'm sorry, Dan. Certainly for the Europa League squad in January, I think he's just taking up space that's not needed, and maybe he's out the door as well. But he's served us well, and we long may that continue in many other avenues. Perhaps maybe he'll come in back to the club later on in a coaching capacity or something. But for the moment, I'm pretty happy. I'm going to cough one moment.
Just you cough. I suppose the question is, with the Europa, it's like it's always this contradiction for me, because it's this thing we waited 30 years for. we were, I did a bloody European dream tracker. Everything was about getting into Europe. And then all summer, it was a case of, well, we can't recruit because we need to recruit based on being in the Europa League. So that was the reason, supposedly, that we were recruiting late on. But then when we get to it now, we're just saying, well, let's just play the second choice players in that competition and see how we go. And it just doesn't tie up. None of it makes sense as a good strategy for what you're trying to do, because it's like, on the one hand, this thing's really important and it's deciding our recruitment policy. But then on the other hand, when you come down to it, you're like, well, let's just pick our second choice players and, not really worry about that competition. So it's like, I don't think, I really struggle still to see that we were sort of holding on to find out about Europa League to recruit a fullback like Savona. Savona didn't choose us because we got in the Europa League rather than the Conference League, for example. And Zinchenko was signed in the last 5 minutes. So again, it's not like he was waiting for that decision either. I think that's a bit of a cover for the fact that, unfortunately, we were just a bit disorganized, or we had people pulling in two different directions all the time, and so nothing ever quite got done. And unfortunately, we are paying a bit of price for that.
But it highlights we probably gate crashed the whole Europe party a season or two early. We came out of nowhere. We came out of 17th place to finish top 7 when we probably should have finished top 3. And my God, I think we talked about what happens if we get in the Champions League, which would be amazing. Are we going to cope? I'm not sure that we would have coped. No. And we also talked about maybe we should really have ended up in the conference. Maybe that would have been a lot better for us to go into the conference where it is a weaker competition, just to kind of dip our toe into the European market in terms of European competitions and get going. We found ourselves in the Europa League, but the problem we got, guys, is that the shit show that's been at the club and the injuries that have presented themselves have meant that we now have had to use the Europa League as a way of getting players game time. When we say they are second choice, that is true. But McAtee is a top player. Hutchinson, not in the squad, is the top player. Limited fullback options or no fullback options is a real issue. So, there's so many different things and filters and things so much context we have to put into the story as to the two campaigns. It has to be about Premier League survival now. It has to be. I mean, listen, we're still in the bottom 3. I do think we'll be safe, and I think it will be Leeds, Burnley, and Wolves that go. But again, we are still quite early in the season. Okay, well, look, we can probably sit and go around in circles on this one. We've got another question, and we're running out of time. So let's go to this. Our last question that was presented to us, and we might have time to dip into the comments, and there's one or two that are in there. This is from Capanosity and Function on X. Has popped up in the chat here and on other pods as well. So thank you for the question. Saying, from the end of Clough to now, Forest, and excluding the fans, Forest have been weak culturally and institutionally. It's been 2 good EPL seasons in 33 years. Like Man United and Ferguson, is the club still in a post-Clough phase? So, I mean, there's more to it that says, does Marinakis have the money and the nous to define a new era? That I think is a yes, definitely. He has the money and he's got the nous, and I think the new era is being defined. But we'll answer that in more detail. But one more time quickly, just for those that can't see it. Like Man United and Ferguson, is the club still in a post-Clough phase? Richard Spray.
Well, I think it's always going to be, well, there's a couple of things, right? You have to take into account. Firstly, I mean, comparing to Manchester United, I get the idea behind the question, but invariably they've got way more money and they've stayed in the Premier League through that time frame that we've been in the Championship, coupled with the fact that Marinakis really didn't take over the club until what was the actual year that he took over? Was it 20,
5 or 6, 7 years now, I think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't think it was that long ago. And he did fulfill his promise to get us back to the Premier League, get us to that historical sort of position, which would be in the Premier League and be a competitive team, which we did last season. I get what he's saying, but yeah, I don't know. I think when you have someone who's that kind of has that legendary status, it's always going to be that way. It would take an enormous he had every ingredient, right? The personality, the tactic. He was a tactician. He held his players accountable. I mean, he was kind of a, for lack of a better word, a total package as a manager in the end. But I would say that's always going to be the case. So I don't know if you can necessarily hold that against the club in some capacity, because it's just such a difficult prospect to try to ever find someone who could supplant him and quote unquote usher in that new era. I mean, I think to a degree, I probably thought that was where we were headed last season. When under Nuno, that he was going to be not of the same, level of Clough, but just for the next 4 or 5, 6 years, be the manager that I'd hoped would continue to keep us in a competitive state, put us in a position where we're finishing in the top 10 perennially, getting us into, and certainly sniffing Europe most seasons. Potentially, if we did win Europa, because that's what we were hoping to do this season, or at least I know Marinakis was hoping to do this season, that we potentially could get into Champions League area and so forth, and with that kind of revenue and that kind of clout, maybe get even better players on the squad, because we knew other players would be leaving that we've developed. So I think it did get all thrown out the window a bit when Nuno was gone. But yeah, I don't know if we'll ever get to that Clough era again, because I just don't think there'll be anybody that's ever like him, at least that can have that longevity and that kind of impact. So I don't even know how to answer that question, to be honest with you. Such a difficult prospect to even consider.
Let me chip in. Look, when Clough left us, he took us down. That's the key thing to remember. We got relegated under Clough in his last season, and that kick-started then the period of up and downness. We went down, we came up and stayed up, and so on. We had 3 relegations, and then we stayed down for 23 years with a bit of league one chucked in as well. So I think in terms of culturally and institutionally, I don't think any club is ever going to be like that. The days of having a manager like Clough and Ferguson and Arsene Wenger at Arsenal stay for that long period of time, I think those days are long gone. And we haven't been, I don't think, completely weak culturally and institutionally over that whole period of time. We had 2 good EPL seasons. That was last year, and probably the one when we finished third is going back to in 94, 95 or whatever it was. But in terms of culturally and institutionally, Steve Cooper, he's the one that transformed his club and gave it back its self-belief and identity. And that, again, was part and parcel because we got up. So it's tied into relegation, it's tied into promotion, it's tied into where you find yourselves in the football pyramid. But Steve Cooper also brought the club back, not only back up into the Premier League, but he was saying the right things. It was the off the pitch stuff that Marinakis was trying to introduce as well. Remember when he took over, they were saying all these things about off-field things, about giving the club back to the community, and that has happened. I think at times it hasn't happened as much or as quick as they wanted it to, but they have done a lot of good things off the pitch as well. The links to the mental health charities, the Toffolo thing last year and the season before that he was involved in, really, really crucial. The Warriors United coming into the club, links to other kind of fan bases as well that might need support. Community action, the coffee club, bringing the former players back in. They were kind of felt ostracized. I'm talking about the Miracle Men here. The Miracle Men felt they didn't have a place at the club. They were welcomed back by Cooper, by Marinakis, John McGovern, who has been in many, many different varieties of roles at the club. I think him being a figurehead is important. A lot of people might think, well, he's a dinosaur. Well, he's a dinosaur that lifted 2 European Cups for the club in our glory day, and he needs the respect. And I think that culturally and institutionally, we are now a club with an identity again. And I know that we've had a rocky phase lately, but I don't think we should ever try and get back to the club that was under Clough, because he ran that club from top to bottom himself, and I don't think that's necessarily the right thing for anyone to do. I think that you need to have proper leadership and you need to have different voices that say different things. And so I fully get on board with the idea of bringing an Edu in, but his brief and his remit has got to be clear, and the fans need to know what he's supposed to be doing. George Sirianos came and went, but when he was brought back, it's because the Taiwo Awoniyi signing that he was getting slated for all of a sudden turned out, and his stock rose. So people come and go in the club, but it's important we have leaders that come and leaders that communicate with each other, and everyone has a voice. The whole stadium thing has been up and down, and I've got to be honest with you, I feel totally disengaged now from the City Ground development. I couldn't give a toss because I'm so disengaged with it, because it's been one thing after another that at the moment I can't deal with it. I'm just whatever. That's one thing they've got to improve on. Make your mind up. So, yes, he has the money and he has the nous to define a new era. He's been doing that, but more work could be done. So we're not in a post-Clough phase. We're in a new era under Marinakis, and I think that staying in the Premier League is crucial to that. If you go down, it all changes again. Danscape.
I guess the premise of the question is that to get out of the post-Clough phase, we almost have to win the Champions League or the Premier League. I guess it's just a very tough ask to feel like you move. And that's the same for Man United after Ferguson, is because everyone else has, jumped up in terms of how they do things. So in the past, you had, like you say, a manager that would control everything, and there were a few really top managers, and everybody else was sort of scraping around with limited resources. Whereas now everyone does things in a different way, and they do things in a smarter way that makes it harder for one club to, or a club to just do things their own way and have success. And I think that's where I would say the last bit of the question regarding, does Marinakis have the money and the nous to define a new era? Well, he has definitely defined a new era, I think, but mainly through money, less so through nous, is how I feel, because I think you look at...
You're right,
well, you look at Sunderland, right? Sunderland's the example. They've got an owner come in with a lot of money, and they got promoted, like literally first time of asking, they got promoted from League One, I think, didn't they? And then they managed to get straight up from the Championship, and now they're doing well in the Premier League, right? That for me is nous. He's got the money. He's clearly got the love of football and the love of owning a football club and all of that stuff. But he's also got the nous to, clearly he's got good people in good places, I think, to get the recruitment right and to say, actually, we don't need to go and sign this big name player in every position or whatever. Maybe we need the right guy, the right big name to come in. The rest of it, we need to follow the other parts of the model that's worked, which is teams like Brentford, right, who don't have the money, but they manage to overachieve year on year. And I think that they're the examples to me that actually mean, I know some people say that Forest have, I suppose we've touched on it earlier, like we've jumped ahead of schedule. But when you look at it, we were in the Championship for 5 full seasons under Marinakis, spending a lot of money. And it was only in that 5th season that we got somewhere. Whereas you compare that with Sunderland, who did it quickly and they did it right. So there is definitely lessons for me where I think that there could be more nous in the way that the club is run. And if we, with the money we've got, sometimes that's what frustrates me, because we've got the resource, but then we still do crazy things like appoint Ange Postecoglou and set ourselves back. And that for me is not nous. That's, passion and all that stuff, but it's not nous. It's that side of it that frustrates me, that we could actually be ahead of where we are now. If we'd have managed to implement that model sooner. So I think that's where I am with it. And it's not so much about Clough now. Football's just massively moved on, like I say. It's about now doing things the right way, as opposed to getting behind like one central figure. It's about doing things the right way across the whole club.
Yeah, I think Marinakis might be blinded by the glint of trophies. He wants that so badly that maybe some of his decision making, certainly with the Ange thing, maybe is questionable, or certainly is questionable. And Tony Bloom, another one at Brighton, with the nous that you're talking about, goes into, I think it's Hearts in Scotland. They're top of the Premiership in Scotland, and you bring him into play, and he's just got something about him. We're out of time or thereabouts, but we're going to have some extra time, guys. I'm not going to help you guys very much with this one, because again, I'm going to give you limited time because we've got to really cut it short. But Moggy Boy is asking, and it's a big question: how do we fix the set piece weaknesses we still have? I mean, that's a big question, and you're going to probably need about 5 hours, but I'm giving you 30 seconds each. I'm going to come to you first, Danscape. Give you a quick bit of thinking time. Here's the question again: how do we fix the set piece weaknesses we still have?
The main thing we have to do is get a consistent team, which I think we're starting to see. Consistent lineup, so they know their jobs and they can all work on it together. And therefore, I think you'll see a natural improvement. It's not necessarily about one tactical switch. I think it's more about players know what they're doing. They know what the guy next to them's doing, and they can adapt on the pitch. And that, for me, is probably the key. And that's a question from my dad, I presume. So thanks for that. And
yeah, of course, Moggy Boy should, I think, as well. So yeah, very good.
Can I ask a question when we finish this one, please?
You can. We'll come to it. You'll have time for that. Richard Spray, set piece weaknesses. How are we going to fix that?
Yeah, I can't disregard anything Dan said. I mean, I think I disagree with it. I think he's laid it out perfectly. I think you would only add one more ingredient for me, and I'm not saying this means you have to get rid of cells, but he definitely is challenged by this. I think you also have to have a little bit of a keeper who's got the willingness to play physical in that area and come off the line and actually try to attack the ball a little bit, because when he doesn't do that, it puts all the onus on the defenders to have to be perfect in a lot of ways, or certainly switched on 100% every second, so as to not leave any potential for a ball coming through, and then or somebody getting double marked and leaving a player coming in advancing from a deeper position to try to head the ball, like with Casemiro, that kind of situation. So I definitely think we need that as part of the ingredients to make it even more successful.
Okay. WT Analysis put something really good on X. Go and check it out when he was talking about the shift in personnel in terms of positionally for set pieces against Leeds. So go and check out Will WT Analysis. Great account, great guy. And his analysis of the set pieces against Leeds was really good to read. I'll quickly add as well on Sells. My gut feeling, this is my hunch, Sells won't be our goalkeeper next season. I think he leaves the club at the end of the season coming up. I think I put that at 80% chance that he leaves the club. I also put it at about 40% chance that he leaves in January. And we go for a whole brand new goalkeeper because
Trafford.
Yeah, that's just an area of the pitch that I'm, a little bit concerned about. And maybe he had his one good season and maybe that's that. Okay, Dan, I'm going to let you ask your question, but very, very quickly, a late submission from Brucey. Who'd win in a WWE style wrestling match? Bolly or Milenkovic? Richard Spray first.
I just think Milenkovic is a ridiculously strong guy. I just think, and he feels more aggressive to me than Bolly. Bolly might be sneaky strong and sneaky aggressive, right? He might, show you something that you're not expecting. But I think Milenkovic to me would definitely win that match.
Danscape. So back.
I mean, what do you expect me to say? Really, I think Bolly's got the experience, got those extra years, a few more moves that he'll have picked up. So I'm going with Bolly.
Oh, there you go.
Of course.
So I'm stuck actually because Milenkovic is my guy, but I think for the question, I think I might actually be leaning more towards Bolly. I think he's got the stature and the size, so maybe I think Milenkovic got his legs are a bit skinny. I think Bolly's a little bit more well built, and he's definitely long in certain areas as well. So I think that I'd go with Willy Bolly. All right, we're out of time, but Dan, you got a question for us?
Okay, so my question is: if one of our relegation rivals, like Leeds or Burnley or West Ham, came in for Taiwo in January, like how much money would you want to do a deal where you actually sold Taiwo to them, to a rival, which would potentially help us with PSR in the summer? It might mean that we don't need to rush to sell someone else, but you are potentially helping a relegation rival. So is that an option you consider at all? Is there a price that you'd put on that?
I'm going to have a go at answering one first, if that's okay, because I haven't so far. I think it would be a really silly decision to reinforce any of our potential rivals in the drop zone with any of our players, whether that's for PSR reasons or whatever, whether it's Taiwo who isn't getting a look in so much. I think if they want to bring in Taiwo, let's say Leeds or Burnley want to bring in a Taiwo Awoniyi, and they've identified him as a player, then it's based surely on something they've seen or him maybe having had some game time, and therefore they think, he could be the guy that gets out of trouble. And so I think that would be a really silly idea. But if you're asking me to answer the question specifically, and we are going to sell, the decision's been made. Look, we're in PSR financial troubles. Taiwo is surplus to requirements. Burnley want him. I think we've got to be asking 20 million. I think if you want him, it's got to be 20 million pounds at least. He's a striker you've identified in January. There aren't many striker options about there. We're not going to make it easy for you to sign him and go, well, you can have him for 5 million or 10 million, 20 million, 25 million maybe. That's where I'd be at, Richard.
Yeah, I was going to say somewhere around 20 or greater. That seems reasonable to me, especially if he scores a couple of goals in the next few, before the end of the calendar year, and he shows a little bit more in that department, because we know he's got it in him because we've seen it. It's just always been about staying fit, right? So seems to be doing that now with less game time. He's been able to manage that a little bit better, but I would say somewhere around 20 might make sense. I don't know what the amortization looks like in terms of where he's at in terms of fulfilling his contract.
Have two seasons.
Yeah. How many years has he got left of his contract?
I think he's 4 or 5? 5, yeah. So
it'll be into his third.
It's a season.
This is season. We signed him in the first season up, so this is his 4th season with Forest. So he should have one more deal left, one more year left. If he doesn't have a 5-year deal. Right.
So it may be reasonable to sell him for 17, even to 20. So you might get some decent return on that. But anyway.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. We're going down with what you're going to say. You can answer your own question.
He looks He just looks very fit and ready and lean. I think he wants the move as well, I guess. So I wonder whether if someone did come in, there would be a potential that the deal happens. I suppose it depends if we can move a bit away from some of those teams to feel less at risk, but it might make sense. I was surprised some of those teams didn't. Well, not surprised because of his injury, but it wouldn't surprise me now if some of those teams do sniff around him, I think.
The thing is, he's getting more game time under Dyche, and it could be that continues to happen. You know, he's with Wood out injured, and we hope he's back. You know, it's Igor Jesus starting, and it's Tyro off the bench, and that's how it's going to be. All right, it's been a really fun episode. I've really enjoyed that, and I hope you guys have too. Please do hit like and subscribe if you could. We want to try and get our subscribers up a bit more. We are trying to get to the 2,000 mark, so please help us along on our journey towards that mark. Please go ahead and follow us on social media channels and all the rest of it. Look out for more episodes. We try and publicize it on X and other places as well. You can set your notifications so you never miss an episode. All right, we're going to close things there. Danscape, anything closing before we go? I'm going to give you 20 seconds.
No, that was my only question for the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan. Absolute legend as ever. Richard Spray, over in Oklahoma.
Nothing to add. Just enjoy this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it has been fun. We'll definitely do this again at some point soon. Thank you for everyone who contributed with questions. Thank you for those in the comments and so on. And we are being asked to give shout outs to certain people, but I'm not going to start reading funny names out again. I got caught out once before. No. I'm not going to get caught out again, you guys.
I was wondering if you're going to go for that.
No.
Come on, Ligma, stop it.
Yeah, keep your eyes peeled, guys. We'll be back very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking